Our next speaker is Dr. Amy Lawyer. She's the department chair at the University of Louisville Equine Industry Program. And she will introduce our next speaker that she's going to work with, and they will discuss and work out some typical responses to these challenges. Please welcome Amy Lawyer.
Good afternoon. How is everybody? I'm going to walk around a little bit. I'm going to kind of stand in the middle. It's going to be kind of like a George Strait concert. I'm not going to sing, but I am going to move a little bit more than he does. I'm going to ask you, if you're kind of on the outside edge, I know I'm that annoying professor teacher that like picks on the people that don't want to be picked on. If you guys could move up and at least be at a table with one other person, because we're going to kind of talk to each other a little bit. So if you could scoot over and I'll kind of introduce myself as you guys are moving. I appreciate it. So my name is Dr. Amy Lawyer. I am the department chair for the Equine Industry Program at University of Louisville, which you can see our football stadium right there. We famously say that we are 1.25 miles from Churchill Downs, and that's significant. We're very proud of that fact. I am a graduate of the University of Louisville Equine Industry Program many years ago. After I graduated from there, I went and got a master's degree in equine reproduction from Colorado State with the plan of coming back to Lexington and working on a thoroughbred breeding farm. And I did that for many years, worked for vet clinics, worked at racetracks, worked in various places around the industry. And I got very, very frustrated because every time I went to do something, somebody go, well, we're not going to really change because that's how we've always done it. Anybody ever heard somebody in the horse industry say that before? Nobody has. Nobody's heard that before. You guys are going to have to participate. Okay. All right. So I decided that I was either going to fight those everyday battles one by one, right, on a daily basis, trying to convince people that change is good and change is better and there's better ways that we can go about this. Or I could go get my PhD and teach the next generation of industry leaders how to embrace change, how to deal with conflict, how to be leaders of the industry going forward. And I felt like I had more of an impact if I went and taught the next generation than if I just sat there and fought with my farm owner on a daily basis. So that's where I am. Please don't hate me because of my connection with U of L. My PhD is actually from UK and I taught there for a number of years. So I'm a proud supporter of both universities and a fan of Arizona as well. Go Wildcats. All right. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about conflict resolution. Now, I did not come up with this title. I'm not sure who did. I don't know if that was Remy or Mick or Jamie. Somebody came up with this, but I thought it was really interesting that they titled it Racetrack Superintendent versus the trainer, right? Because why? That is already a contentious relationship that we're presenting up there. How many people, raise your hand, if you've ever had a negative interaction at a racetrack with somebody? 1, 2, 3, 4, a few more. Okay. So would we like to avoid this? Probably. Okay. Are there ways that we can try to prevent this? Yeah, there are some ways that we can prevent this. Are there ways that we can better diffuse the situation if it encounters us? Absolutely. And a lot of these are just standard conflict resolution techniques that I get from my training in leadership, which leadership is just dealing with people. And guess what? It's not always easy to deal with people. How many people in here would rather deal with a horse, a tractor, or dirt on a daily basis than people? I would as well. Unfortunately, horses, tractors, and dirt have to do with people. And so we always have to deal with people. So we need to learn how to deal with people so that we can have more fun dealing with horses, tractors, and dirt, right? So this is what I want you to do. Along with the people at your table, I want you to tell, we're not going to get around to everybody. We're just going to have a few minutes to do this. Somebody tell a story, your best story that you can come up with, of a negative interaction that you had with somebody at a racetrack. Ready to go. Okay. Did we have some good stories? Were we able to at least share something? We probably all had some sort of interaction. I hope you made yourself the hero in that story. Otherwise, you're not a very good storyteller. All right. So We have to first recognize, though, what creates conflict, okay? So audience participation here, what creates conflict? Why do people get upset in the first place? What did you say? Change, absolutely. Why do people not like change? We're creatures of habit, right? We like routine. We like to be able to predict the next thing that's going to happen. So anytime something's different, all of a sudden, we don't know how to react to it, and that's uncomfortable. What did you say? It takes effort, right? Why, as the older we get, are we more resistant to adopting new technology? All of us, when we were teenagers, were probably up to date on the latest fad, right? But then the older we get, the more resistant we are. Why? Because you have to learn something new. It takes time. It takes effort, right? What else? More expectation. Explain that.
Poor expectation.
Oh, poor expectation. Okay. So you're not managing their expectations well, right? What else? Anybody else? Okay, I got some ideas. Okay. First of all, we have a difference of opinion, right? Somebody else wants to do it one way, you're doing it somewhere else, and now our minds are not compatible, right? So we have a difference of opinion. Okay. We have a lack of knowledge or information. So if I don't know why you did something, I'm going to be upset, right? Let me give you a scenario. Picture yourself driving down a country highway. You're going 55, 65 miles per hour, okay? And all of a sudden, you come up on a speed limit sign that says 25. What's your initial reaction? What? Hit the brakes. Hit the brakes. Why? Why are you hitting the brakes? Why?
Because the sign said 25 mile an hour.
Because you don't want to do what?
Ticket.
You don't want a ticket. And what's your assumption?
Probably get a ticket.
Because this is a speed trap, right? They're out to get us. Well, all of a sudden we change speeds. There's probably a cop hiding behind the bushes right there. How dare they? Are we happy about this? Or do we feel like they're out to get us? We feel like they're out to get us, right? Okay. What if in the next 50 yards, you see blinking lights and you see an elementary school and all of a sudden it says school zone? Are we as angry as we were before when we thought it was a speed trap? Why? We understand why we're slowing down, because hopefully, collectively, we want to keep children safe and we agree that that's a good way to do it. But before you knew the why, we're angry. Our initial human reaction is to be angry if we don't understand why we had to change all of a sudden, if we feel like somebody's out to get us, right? We also have an assumption of wrongdoing. Okay? If something changes, we don't know why. A lot of times our human nature is to assume that somebody's out to get us. You don't like me. You're doing this against me, right? But then again, if we understand why, it's easier to understand, it's easier to go along with it. Assumption of apathy or ignorance, okay? You make a change, and somebody's either going to assume you don't like them, you're out to get them, or they're going to assume you're lazy and cutting corners, or that you're stupid and you don't know what you're doing. Anybody ever been there before? Anybody ever accused of that? Raise your hand in here if you make decisions while taking care of your racetrack because you're lazy and you don't care about the welfare of horses. Raise your hand. Nobody's raising their hand? Why? Because that's not why you do it, right? We're all here. If you're in this position for any other reason than you like what you do and you do care about horses, then you're probably in the wrong profession because it's way too difficult and you take way too much crap from people to do this on a daily basis, right? So if we're all in this because we do care about horses, because we do care about, take pride in our work, then is the assumption of apathy or ignorance correct? I'm going to assume that it's not. But raise your hand if you've ever been accused of this, that you just don't care or you don't understand. Okay? So, we're going to start first by how do we prevent conflict? Because preventing is usually better than having to resolve it. Yes? Right? If we can avoid it in the first place, then we don't have to do all the things that we're going to talk about next to try to resolve it. Okay? So, first thing, you have to understand the environment, meaning who might complain, right? Who's our biggest complaint? Who's your biggest complainer? Let me hear. Who's complaining most often? Trainers? Anybody else? Or is it all trainers? Mostly trainers? Okay. Okay. So, why do trainers complain so much? Grant, why do trainers complain so much? Why do trainers complain so much? In most industries, this happens. Happens probably even more so in the racing industry, but manure runs downhill, right? And so when things aren't going right, everybody wants somebody to blame, right? And so easy people to blame are people who don't have a lot of recourse. They don't have a lot of power to come back at the person who's complaining, okay? And so that's why within our industry, we see a lot of shots across the bow, right? We're attacking ourselves within our own industry. And so a lot of fingers get pointed at track maintenance, and breeders, right? Where when we know, if we actually want to be honest about it, and we're talking about things within the industry, horses getting injured, horses breaking down, is most likely a multitude of factors that all come together at once, right? That probably includes any number and varying degree of conditioning, training, nutrition, genetics, track conditions, weather conditions, jockeys ride, other horses. There's so many factors that culminate into this. But it's very hard to deal with that as a person, especially if your emotional state, your mental state, and your financial state is on the line with that horse, right? And so in that state, you're trying to find somebody to blame. And guess what? You guys are easy targets because you don't have a lot of recourse to come back at them. Does that make sense? So what I'm saying is, not that there's necessarily a solution for that, but if you understand where they're coming from, it's easier to detach the complaints from a personal attack. If you take it personal, it's going to escalate real quickly. And it might feel personal, and they might say things that are personal. But is that complaint personal? Do they know you as a human being? Most of the time they don't. Even if they've known you for years, they don't know who you are, right? And so one of the first steps to preventing conflict is to understand it's not personal. They're just looking for somebody to blame. We've all been frustrated in some form or fashion in the work that we do, or in our personal lives, or driving down the road. So we can understand frustration without agreeing with why they're frustrated. Does that make sense? And if you can recognize that, then it's way easier for you to detach that emotional connection and that personal connection with what they're complaining about, okay? Number 2, communication. Communication is difficult for everybody. Every single company out there is going to tell you that communication is one of their top 5 most important pillars. And then they're also going to tell you that communication is one of the top 5 things they struggle with. So if everybody knows that communication is important, why do we still have a hard time communicating? Because it's hard. Because it's not easy to put what you have in your mind into words to where somebody else is going to understand it. And it takes time and thought to do it. But it's important because of what we talked about on the last side. Why? If you guys are making decisions that are going to impact other people, it puts a lot of minds at ease if they understand why you did it. right? Now, you can't always explain why you did it, and they might not always agree with why you did it, but people respect the fact that you thought through it and you made an informed decision, as opposed to just making an arbitrary knee-jerk reaction. And if they don't know that you actually put time and effort and thought into the decision you made, they're going to assume it was just an arbitrary decision. So if you communicate with them, hey, this is why we did X, Y, and Z, they might go, well, that was stupid, but okay. And a lot of times it resolves before it starts, okay? Have a method to your decisions and be consistent. So if you have a reason why you do a certain thing to the track at a certain point in time, try to be consistent with that. Because then why? Who said the problem with change is not being able to expect what's going to happen? If you have a consistent method of how you take care of things, now they know what to expect, right? Again, they may disagree with it, but if they can anticipate it and expect that, way easier to deal with and digest, okay? So the next part is, okay, having to ask yourself, when somebody comes at you, okay, do they have a legitimate point that they're making? And have you evaluated yourself and your work? Because it's really easy to, when somebody starts attacking you, immediately put up a wall, right? I don't want to listen to it. You know, one of the most, I worked on the track for a while. I have heard people say this, okay? I have heard a trainer complain, and I've heard a track superintendent say, you just train horses and I'll take care of the track, right? Okay, but here's the deal, okay? Everybody in whatever job you're doing can benefit from more information and diverse perspectives. So how you make decisions about your daily track management might actually be improved if you listen to other people's perspective, because they have a different opinion on things. Now, they might not be right 90% of the time, but that 10% of the time that they tell you something that you didn't consider, maybe that's a good thing. So you have to at least allow yourself to be open-minded enough to at least listen to what they're saying, to go, wait a minute, do they have a point or do they not? Maybe they do. And sometimes they come at you and you put up such a wall that it's like, I don't want to listen to it, when actually if they had come at it a little nicer, maybe we could work together. You can't hold them accountable, because guess what? We can't ever control what somebody else does. We can only control how we respond to it, right? So just because they came at it a poor way doesn't mean that what they have to say isn't a legitimate concern that you need to listen to, okay? All right. Unfortunately, not everything can be prevented, and sometimes they will engage in conflict. So how do we handle it when somebody comes at us and tries to complain and attack and confront us, okay? Number one, and this is probably one of the hardest things to do, like I said before, is not take it personal. They may say things. They may call you names. They may call your mother names, okay? But you also have to remember that they're in a bad place themselves emotionally, right? And we've all been there. We've all been in bad places where we act and behave ways that we are not necessarily proud of. And so again, if you can remember that this is about their own frustrations and them trying to find an outlet, it's easier to detach that personal characteristic to it, okay? Number two, hear them out. And this is really hard to do, because you got to sit there and you got to bite your tongue. And I know not everybody's very good at that, but here's the deal. 3 things usually happen if you just sit there and let them finish before you start saying something. Usually they realize they're being irrational. This is the most rewarding thing to see play out in real time. Because a lot of times if you let people talk without interrupting, they end up just running out of things to say. And they also realize that whatever they're complaining about, you probably don't actually have legitimate control over. Okay, I saw this firsthand in when I was working at UK. I used to help manage a bunch of horse shows. And if you think track people complain, you ought to go to a horse show. I had a gentleman come in and he was literally screaming at me in my face, calling me every name in the book. And what I found out was he had a horse that got disqualified because it was lame. Nothing we can do about that. He had another horse that broke gait during a class and got placed last. And it was about 95 degrees outside. Does that make people's tempers flare a little bit? Yeah, it does. And so I sat there and I just let him vent. And he got about 5 minutes into it and realized that I wasn't yelling back at him. And he realized he looked really stupid and that nothing that he was complaining about I had any legitimate control over. He ended up apologizing to me and leaving the whole area without me saying a single word. Sometimes people need to vent. Now, is it fair that they're venting at you? No, it's not, but it's what happens sometimes, right? The next thing that might happen is that they just need to get their frustrations out. Like I said, they just need to vent, right? And they end up coming up with their own solution. Okay? The other thing that might happen is you actually hear that there is a problem that you do have control over and you can fix. But if you immediately put up a wall, if you immediately start trying to speak back, and now it's an argument, now it's an altercation, you never get to that point where we can actually solve a problem, right? Next bullet point, okay? Understand the frustration even if you disagree. We've already talked about that. Be aware of other factors that might be escalating the dispute. Like I said, when it's 95 degrees outside, tempers are hot. People are uncomfortable. They're more likely to get upset. When it's a big stakes race coming up and there's a lot of money on the line, people have more emotional connections to that and they're going to be hyped up. When somebody had to, transport their horse across country or across an ocean to be here, they're going to be more emotionally, financially charged up about this. So understand that's playing into this reaction from people, and then you get to be the one with the level head, right? You get to be the one that's calming the situation. Okay, so Grant Forster is here, who is a trainer who has volunteered to be the big bad trainer. You want to come up here? And we're going to do a little bit of role play, okay? So do I have any volunteers that wants to be the one getting complained to? Any? Excellent. Come on up here. Okay, so what we're going to do, Grant has been brainstorming some scenarios and some insults. So I'm going to hand him the microphone. All right?
Drinking whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you need to do to get yourself in the right mind space. And you're gonna complain, you're gonna insult, and then we're gonna see a response, and then we're gonna see how that goes. All right?
I'm actually a really nice person when you get to know me. So just lean into him. Okay. All right. What the hell is the matter with you? The track is so dry and loose. It's like a beach out there. Do you have to pay for the water yourself? Every horse I've got is sore on their high suspensories. I've bowed 2 tendons in the last week, and I've got to pay for private school next week. What is going on? What is the problem?
Actually, we are adding water every race. It is a little bit windier and sunny that we can't catch up to it, but there's plenty of moisture underneath. If you look at the hoof prints, it's a lot darker than the rest because it's a top that's drying real quick and we can't keep up with it. So.
Okay. Hold on. You stay there. You can sit down if you want to.
That's it.
Okay.
That was
For
easy.
now, I'll get somebody else. Okay. So now it is a controlled situation. We know Grant wasn't actually mad. Okay. So it's a little bit easier. Why was that a good response though? He was truthful. He's giving information. He's educating about the situation. Now, do you think that satisfied Grant? Do you think Grant's going to go, oh, okay, now I know, and walk himself back to his barn quietly? So what's your counter to that? What do you come back with? Do you like that explanation? Are you okay with that explanation?
Well, I understand it, so yeah, but I mean, don't know what,
It might not resolve it right there.
Right.
Right? It might not be good enough. Why? Because they're still mad. They're still mad. I want to be mad at something. Yes, that makes sense to me, but I still want to be mad. Okay. So here's some tips and tricks, okay, that you can use to try to de-escalate the anger. All right. So first of all, start coming at me. Same thing.
the same speech or.
Whatever.
I don't know what the hell you're doing out there. The track is so hard. Every horse I've got seems to get chipped every other week. It's so uncomfortable out there. The horses are just not doing well, and our horses are just not. They're not running as well as they're training. I don't know what you can do, but it seems like you got your head up your ass.
Okay, I don't know if you noticed what I was doing, and it's not as effective because he's not really mad. Okay, but I have breathing up there, and I know this sounds stupid. This sounds stupid. Okay. But if you start controlling your breathing and you start lowering your tone of voice, almost to a point where they can kind of barely hear you, so they have to talk quieter to hear what your response is, what does it do to them? Can you stay mad if somebody's like totally chill? Really hard to stay mad if the person that you're mad at isn't affected. The thing that they're wanting is feedback. They're wanting to engage. And if you don't give them that, it's really hard to keep an energy level up here. Really hard. It's amazing if any of you guys have small kids or grandkids, and they're like having a meltdown, sitting them on your lap, and you literally just start going. Within about 20 seconds, they'll start matching your breathing. It's an innate human response. It's the same thing that happens with horses. You go in a stall with a horse, and either if you're escalated, they'll start raising their heart rate, or if you're receptive to them, your heart rate and blood pressure will actually go down if they're the one relaxed. Okay? I know, again, it sounds gimmicky, it sounds stupid, I promise. If you can control your breathing and you can control your tone of voice, you've got control of that entire interaction. Because they'll eventually start coming down off their high horse. Because they feel like they're just yelling at a wall now. Nobody wants to yell at a wall. But if they're willing to talk to you like a normal human being, now we can have a discussion, right? I bet everyone in here is willing to have a normal adult conversation at a normal level, right? So breathing, volume, and tone, okay? Policy to back you up. What does that mean? What does policy mean to back you up? Yeah, if you have a reason why you're making your decision, takes it out of your hands, right? Hey, the people I work for won't give me any more money to do a better job, right? Hey, this is the only equipment I got. I'm doing the best I can with the resources that I have, right? If we're both doing the best we can, hard to argue with that, right? So again, it's another form of like deflection. We're blaming somebody else. But if you don't have any recourses, feel free. Point the finger at somebody else. Listen, I'm doing the best I can with the resources that I got. I'm trying to work as hard as I can. I got all my people working as hard as they can. We're trying to keep up with this. We're doing the best we can. And they might mutter something ugly at you under their breath as they walk away. But how do they respond to that, right? Okay, here we go. Do it again, but I want you to use an absolute in your argument. Okay, so say something like, this track is never,
How is it possible that this track is never the same from day one to the next day? Do you just not care? Is there a problem? Do you not show up? What is going on? Is your assistant not paying attention?
Here's the deal. It's always important, whatever side you're on, to avoid using absolutes. Okay? So he said never. Is it really never? Now you get to pull that out of your back pocket. Actually, according to our readings that we've taken, this track has been this consistent this many days in a row. Right? Hard to argue with that. Right? If you use an absolute, all they have to do is come up with one instance that it wasn't true to negate your entire argument. So pay attention to whether they're using absolutes and make sure you avoid using absolutes. Okay? Last point of the tips and tricks, and then we'll do one more role play, okay, is always argue in public. Why do we always argue in public? Witnesses. It's important to have witnesses. Why do we want witnesses? Why do we want witnesses? Your juries, your peers. It can help make a point. If you have somebody to corroborate your story, right? Hey, yeah, that guy's telling the truth. We did exactly what he said, right? Hard to accuse me of something I didn't do and somebody else is saying, no, I did do it, right? What else? Why do we want to argue in public? Because we don't want it to dissolve into a he said situation, right? I want somebody else there that can say, wait a minute, if this gets out of hand, you can vouch that I did or didn't do what happened, right? So I'm always, in fact, when I was in these situations where I frequently had somebody come and arguing with me, I told my team members, if you see somebody arguing with me, all I want you to do is drop what you're doing and come stand next to me. I don't want you to interject. I don't want you to say anything. You don't have to fight for me. I just need you to stand there so that I have a witness to what I said, what they said, and how the whole situation was handled. Okay? Last reason why it's important to argue in public. Some people don't care about their reputation, but some do. Right? And if a lot of people see them acting irate, irrational, unbecoming of a professional, that hurts their reputation in business. Right? Like I said, some people could care less, and that's their own problem. But a lot of people are more willing to say something to you in private than they are in the middle of a group of people. And so a lot of times they'll be more in check with their language and their behavior and how they're seen amongst their peers if they're out in the open. Okay, we're going to wrap this up. I hope you understand that this is coming at a place where we're trying to resolve relationships, right? Like we said before, unfortunately, we always have to deal with people. And whatever aspect of our jobs it is, we're going to have to deal with people eventually. And those relationships and how we deal with people and being able to work together cohesively is the only way that we can actually get our jobs done in a way that everybody succeeds and we promote this industry and we're able to sustain it and keep it going. Right? And the more internal divisions that we have in this industry, the more susceptible we are to outside ridicule and chipping away at the core of this business. And so if we can resolve some of these internal struggles and be able to deal with the people in a civil manner on a day-to-day basis, and everybody's trying to work together for the betterment of the sport, the betterment of the horses, the betterment of the track experience, then we all win, right? And so we always have to remind ourselves, why are we here? Why are we doing this? Okay? And we are at such a better place right now than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. But we can't let our internal struggles erode at the progress that we've made. Dr. Peterson has done amazing work. We have so much more resources and materials and research than we ever have before. But unfortunately, it's still not an exact science. And until we get a computer program that can tell us exactly how much water to put on, when to put it on, in every condition to make the horses avoid injury at all costs, we're going to have conflict. And so we've got to be able to recognize conflict, anticipate where conflict may be, prevent it when it's possible, and then be able to resolve it calmly and professionally so that we can, again, work together to achieve our common goal, which is to sustain this industry so that all of us continue to have a job, right? So I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you so much for having me today. I hope you got something out of this. I hope I kept you awake after lunch, and I'll pass it over to Dan.
Thank you.